Stereotyping, prejudice, and discrimination. This is an important topic in social psychology. These concepts describe relations between different social groups. Let's look at some examples of stereotyping, prejudice, and discrimination, and try to understand what are the differences between these three concepts. Stereotypes are overgeneralization about some characteristics of a group. For example, here's a really interesting example of stereotyping and prejudice and discrimination. Yeah, this person happens to be a white guy, and he was berating some Asian people in Richmond. I think this happened at a superstore in Richmond. And he was really kind of verbally abusing some random strangers in the street. He was telling the lady, "Eat your Chinese food. I'm angry at the Chinese culture." Well, this might be a stereotype. Eat your Chinese food. He categorized this lady as a Chinese person, and a stereotype of Chinese people is they eat Chinese food, obviously, and there are some other stereotypes about the Chinese. Some of the stereotypes are good, some of them are negative. So that's a stereotype. It's a belief that associates a whole group of people with a certain trait. It is overgeneralization. Sometimes there's a grain of truth in stereotypes. For example, well, most Chinese people eat Chinese food, but there are exceptions. Some Chinese, ethnic Chinese people, they don't eat Chinese food. And the stereotypes are very prevalent in society. For example, we have stereotypes about the different age groups. Even the insurance companies sometimes use stereotypes. Well, if you are going to buy a car insurance, I bought my first car insurance in the United States. That was in the 1990s, 1998. Yeah, maybe 1998. When I was buying car insurance, the insurance agent asked me several questions. The first question that, what's your age? Are you 35 years or older? If you are 35 years or older, you get a discount. So that's a stereotype. And well, the insurance company, they have data. According to their data analysis, people who are older are relatively less reckless. They drive more carefully compared with teenagers. If you are 16 years old or 17 years old, and when you go buy a car insurance, they might charge you more money. They believe that younger people, especially teenagers, are less careful in their driving habits. There might be a statistical evidence for that, but that is still overgeneralization. And I have seen people who are middle-aged, people who are in their 50s, still driving aggressively and recklessly. However, there's grain of truth to some stereotypes. It's useful for understanding people on a group basis. But at the individual level, when you use your stereotypes to individuals, to understand individuals, you might make mistakes, errors. That's a stereotype. A prejudice is a feeling, it's a hostile or negative feeling about people based on their membership in a certain group. I am angry at the Chinese culture, so that's prejudice. This guy has hostile feelings toward the Chinese and the group. And then discrimination is behavior. discrimination is behavior directed against people solely because of their membership in a particular group. You might say this person's behavior is discrimination. He is abusing the lady just because he believes she's a Chinese person. So that's discrimination. It's behavior, it's action. Those are very important distinctions. There has been several news reports of discrimination or hate speech around the BC area. Now this might be I don't know where this happened, probably at the airport. This person was berating an Asian person. Speak English. No, you're in Canada. That shows a lot of hostile feelings and some discrimination. And basically, these people are jerks, very aggressive people, very unpleasant people. Why do we have stereotypes? Why do people use stereotypes? A basic mental process is categorization, classification. We automatically classify people into different groups. Gender identity is a prominent classification system. Race, ethnicity, religious grouping, age. Age classification is very automatic and it is very prominent. Also, when you classify people, you might classify them into out groups versus in groups. In groups are people who belong to the same group as you. Out groups are people who are from a different group. Classification produces a lot of interesting effects. This is like a gender attribution study. The details you can find in the textbook. The researchers ask participants to listen to a conversation. And they listen to a conversation between multiple people. There are several male participants to the discussion and several female participants to the discussion. And everybody is speaking. And then the researchers ask the participants to remember, to recall who said what. So while the participants were listening to the discussion, some of them received instruction to memorize the words spoken by the discussants. Some of them did not receive the instructions to memorize anything, to try to remember anything, just listen to the discussion. And when the research participants recalled who said what, they made errors. So sometimes they believe that A said this, but actually it was not A, but B. Another person said that statement. When the researchers analyzed the errors the participants made, they found that within group errors or within gender errors are more frequent than between gender errors. And when the participants made errors in who said what attributions, they're more likely to mix up two female speakers. And they're less often in mixing up a male speaker and a female speaker. It doesn't matter what instructions is received, whether it is received the memorization instruction or no memorization instruction, they always tend to mix up between two speakers of the same gender, male with male, female with female. So categorization makes people more likely to view members of the same group as more similar to each other. This categorization effect is not limited to perceiving people. It is also quite prominent in perceiving physical objects. Tadfeld, he is an important social psychologist. He did a lot of clever experiment about social perception, categorization, group relations, and he asked people to make line judgments. So these are longer lines, short lines. And he was really interested in how people perceive C and D. C and D are pretty much the same length. When you show this picture, all the lines are in the same color. Most of the research participants would say that C and D are the same length. They don't differ in length. But when you create categorization, when you group A, B, C according to the color, give them a unique color to D and F, some people say C is longer than D. So categorizing the length into different groups according to color make the different groups seem more different. So categorization creates a bigger intergroup difference in terms of perception. And members within one group are perceived as more similar. Sometimes this in-group or within-group homogeneity is a bias. It's not realistic. We perceive people from different ethnic groups as more similar to each other. They all look alike. Some people, some North American people say all Asians look alike. I can't differentiate from them. It's hard for them to differentiate the difference between different Asians. And this can create a lot of trouble. Over ethnic identification bias. This could be relevant to police. And if you are asked to identify one, like an Asian person from a lineup of 5 Asian people, you're more likely to make mistakes. People are less sensitive to the individual differences, individual features in people from a different group. These are cognitive effects, but then there are also motivational effects in categorization, categorizing people into different groups. Categorization produces in-group favoritism. We favor people from our own group. And this kind of effect could occur even if the groups are not important, are not even meaningful. Even when you kind of assign very unimportant groups to people, it's enough to create in-group favoritism. This study was also from Tadfeld. It was done in 1970. Tadfeld gave college students unimportant groups. They would tell college students that according to my assessment, you belong to group A or group B. And The assessment is really unimportant. The assessment may be based on artistic tastes. The assessment may not be even valid, is unimportant, but this kind of unimportant characteristics such as artistic tastes or tendency to overestimate or underestimate the number of dots on the screen, these unimportant characteristics are enough to make people feel that I belong to this group. Once people feel that they belong to a particular group, they start favoring their in-group and they start to disfavor out-group. Tadfeld asked the participant to allocate points or reward points to members of their own group versus members of a different group, out-group. And the researchers gave the participants a matrix to make selections. The participants seem to favor, they choose like matrices or the options that favor their in-group. So give an in-group member 16 points, give the out-group 7 points. They don't usually choose equal distribution. So what do you want? They give the option that 13 for the in-group, 13 for the out-group. No, the participants don't like that. How about giving the in-group 12, the out-group 15? No, they don't like that. And they favor the in-group. They favor the in-group, they choose this kind of options. And they don't strive for win-win situation. They want to make sure that members of their own group get the upper hand. That's in-group favoritism. However, there are exceptions to in-group favoritism. When the in-group is a disgrace, when the in-group member does something that violates your positive image of your own group, you're not going to like him. It's called black sheep effect. People don't like black sheep from their own group because they're threatening. They're threatening to your positive image about your group. Suppose if you are a Canadian and you believe that Canadians are nice, Canadians are decent, Canadians are friendly, and Canadians are like non-violent people, peaceful people, and this image group identity is important to you. When you see a black sheep from the Canadian group, you don't like him. If you see a guy, like this guy, like this, suppose you see a Canadian looks like this guy, really aggressive, really unfriendly, really mean and nasty, and you're not going to like him as a Canadian because he is a black sheep. You have particular negative point of view or negative view of this person. This is an exception to in-group favoritism. People with certain personality styles or characteristics are particularly prone to in-group favoritism. One personality characteristic is called authoritarianism. Authoritarianism. People with this characteristic, they support authoritarian ideas. They prefer simplistic, traditional, conservative ideas. Many of the socially conservative people are authoritarianists. Another personality characteristic is social dominance orientation. Social dominance. People with this characteristic believe that groups are not equal. Groups are not equal to each other. And some groups of people are inferior to other groups. if you look at the person in this news report, he is demonstrating a lot of social dominance orientation. He believes that the Chinese are just inferior. He's angry at the Chinese culture. Also, this guy speak English. You are in Canada. Not a lot of social dominance orientation. They believe groups are not equal to each other. Some groups are superior. Usually their own group is superior to other groups. They believe that it's okay for some groups to have more chance in life than others. Stereotypes are prevalent and difficult to change because sometimes stereotypes are useful. Stereotypes are heuristics. They're shortcuts in our thinking. And when we use stereotypes, there might be illusory correlation. And there might be an ultimate attribution error. And there might be a perceptual confirmation bias. These are important concepts related with stereotyping. Illusory correlation. So illusory correlation is that when you see two unique features, and suppose when you see a minority person engaging in aggressive behavior, being a minority is unique, and aggressive behavior is also unique. And people find it easy to make associations or correlations between these two features, but it's not realistic. It's an illusory correlation. And I have experienced that suppose I go for car repair. I don't go for car repair oftentimes, so that's a unique experience, rare experience. And then I get a poor service. I get a really poor quality service, and I get overcharged. I get ripped off by the shop. That's a unique experience. That's a very striking, negatively unique experience. And also, if the shop happens to be operated by a minority group, and then it's easy for me to make this kind of illusory correlations or associations. I tend to link everything together. Okay, that particular group that operates the car repair shops tend to provide substandard service, and they are unscrupulous in doing business. That's illusory correlation. That will keep really stereotyping going and hard to change. The ultimate attribution error, this is a motivational phenomenon. So when we are making attributions for the behavior of our own in-group members, we are kind of following the self-serving principle. And so we believe the good behaviors of our group is due to our good quality. We are helpful because we have high moral standards. And for our group, when my group or members of my group do something wrong, being aggressive, committing crimes, I tend to blame the environment. Okay, he marked somebody because he was unfairly treated as a minority group, because he was receiving a lot of hate messages, or he was socially isolated, marginalized by the mainstream society. Find excuses for the negative behavior of my own group members. However, when we are making attributions for other group members of other groups, were less favorable. When members from a different group commit violence or aggressive behavior, I believe that if their group, that group are particularly aggressive or violent, be careful about them, stay away from them. And when we make attributions for positive behavior for the other group, we tend to make external attributions. Oh, it's a situation that requires them to do that. It's their job. They're just doing their job. Their job requires them to be nice, to be helpful. They're firefighters, so their job requires them to be selfless. These are the ultimate attribution errors. They're very much similar to the self-serving bias at the individual level. The ultimate attribution error is also called the group-serving bias. The group-serving bias. The influence of stereotypes and prejudice can be very subtle, can be very insidious. It can be automatic. The researchers did a study. These are two studies, actually, priming studies. The researchers, in one study, the researchers first show black faces and white faces on the computer screen. And then they show either a tool or a gun. And the researchers ask participants to view the screen and then make a decision, is that a gun or not a gun? They found that following black faces, the research participants are more likely to mistake tools as weapons. So that's an error. And this has a lot of police an implication with police activities. And if the police officers have this kind of influence from stereotype and prejudice, they're more likely to mistake African American or black people as being armed when they are unarmed. A couple of years ago, or not really long ago, recently in Wisconsin, there was a case that a police officer mistakenly opened fire on a black young man that was unarmed. The black young man was reaching in his pocket to try to retrieve his wallet to show the police officer his ID. But the police officer thought he was trying to pull a gun. And that's influenced by the priming of stereotypes and prejudice. Researchers also did a study that they asked research participants to look at the screen and decide whether to shoot or not shoot, depending on whether the person on the screen is armed with weapons or guns. So they found that white participants are more likely to shoot at black participants mistakenly. There are different ways to measure prejudice. One simple way to measure prejudice is a simple report. You ask people about their opinions or their feelings about certain groups, certain cultures. Sometimes the people voluntarily report that, like this guy, I am angry at the Chinese culture. He is self-reporting that he has a strong prejudice against the Chinese culture. But sometimes, even if you ask people, do you have a prejudice? Are you angry about Chinese culture? They wouldn't tell you. They can hide that. Psychologists have found some clever ways to measure implicit prejudice. So one way to measure implicit prejudice is a seating arrangement. The researcher would ask participants to come to the lab. In the lab, the researchers ask the participant to sit in a waiting area. In the waiting area, there's a row of seats. At the end of the row, there's a minority person. For example, there's a Black person sitting there. And one way to measure prejudice is to observe how far away the subject sit to the Black person or the minority person. If the subject sits next to the Black person or the minority person, that would be an indicator of low prejudice. But if participants sit really far away from the minority person, that would indicate a stronger prejudice. In this research, these two researchers, studied the social norms influence on prejudice. First, they have a grouping variable. Some subjects are high prejudice, and you can measure that by self-report. Give them questionnaire. So these are like a blatantly high prejudice people. They don't like African Americans. They report that. Some people are low prejudice. They're neutral or even positive in attitude to the minority group, for example, Black people. And then this is a grouping variable. A grouping variable is that you divide the subjects into the high prejudice group versus low prejudice group. And then within each group, you tell them the norm of the university. In the high prejudice norm group, you tell the subject that at this school, the students have a strong prejudice. At this school, most students do not like minorities. In another condition, you tell the subject that the norm of the university is low prejudice. You tell the subject that in this university, at this school, we treat everybody equally. We don't have a lot of negative feelings to minority groups. We welcome minority groups. We're inclusive. We practice multiculturalism. Everybody has value. And you create these two expectancies of norms. You do the same thing for the low prejudice group. You tell some of them that at this university, we don't like certain people. We don't hang out with minorities. And in the other group, you tell them that we are welcoming, we are inclusive, and we are multicultural. One thing you find out, the high prejudice people, the people who have high prejudice as a group, they sit further away from the Black person. No matter what you tell them, they sit far away. But they sit particularly further away when you tell them that the group norm is racist. You tell them the whole university, and the university, most people, they don't feel comfortable around minorities. And that makes them show more prejudice. On the other hand, if you tell them that this university, this environment has an inclusive culture, they sit a little bit closer to the minority person, demonstrating a lesser level of implicit prejudice. How about the people who are low in prejudice? As a group, they sit closer to the minority person. If you take the average of these two groups, it's going to be lower than the average of these two groups. And I don't know how to interpret this one. When you tell them that the university has a high prejudice culture or the norm, most people at this university don't feel comfortable around minorities. They sit even closer to the minority person. And maybe the culture trigger their strong resistant attitude. Maybe it's conflict there with their personal values. I am a very fair and a welcoming person. I'm not a prejudice. I'm not a racist, but this place is racist. I'm against that. And that might make them sit even closer to the Black person. So the norms would have a different influence on people who have high prejudice versus low prejudice. Stereotyping has a lot of negative consequences, especially for those who are the victims of stereotyping. One prominent feature is being stereotyped or being stigmatized is very stressful, and it influences the psychological well-being of the people who get stereotyped or stigmatized. If the culture, if the norm of the environment is just have a lot of strong stereotypes about people with disabilities or people who are visible minorities, and then the people with disabilities and the visible minorities are going to suffer a lot of anxiety, even fear. And in severe cases, that might lead to a depression. Psychological well-being is very challenging for those people who are the target of stereotype. And it might produce retaliation. Retaliation might result in reverse discrimination. Behavior confirmation, self-fulfilling prophecy. So sometimes, give one example. Suppose there's a lot of stereotypes of Asian people being shy, and that might produce a self-fulfilling prophecy. So if I know that most people around me believe that as an Asian person, I'm shy, that will make me even shyer. That will make me even kind of less likely to talk to people, to reach out to people, and to be outgoing. Stereotype threat is another effect of stereotyping. A lot of research shows that this is an important feature. So let's talk about stereotype threat first. This line of research was pioneered by Steele and Aronson. In 1995, they did a classical study to demonstrate stereotype threat. They recruited a student from Stanford University. These are high academic achievers. Some of the students were African Americans, some of them were white students. So race is a grouping variable. You group the students into two groups according to their ethnicity. And then you give them a test, an exam. For everybody, for all the people in the study, they are randomly assigned to one of two conditions. In one condition, before you take the exam, you report your race on the top of the exam paper. You write your name and you write your race. In this case, I am Joe Smith, I'm African American. In another condition, you just write your name. You don't need to indicate your race. You do this for the Black people and for the white people. So the race is grouping variable, and cross with this grouping variable, you have the independent variable. The independent variable is report race versus not reporting race. The dependent variable is task score. If you do the math test, you get graded, and you get a score, you get a grade. The researcher found that for African American subjects, the groups that had to indicate their race on average received lower scores than the group that had not reported their race. So reminding them of their race really is detrimental, distract them from the task, and impair their performance on the task. And another feature that the researcher tell everybody that this exam will test your academic competence. And the researchers interpret the result this way. So the situation, the test creates a threat when it combines with race. African students, when they're reminded of their race or ethnicity, I am Black or I'm African American, and then when they encounter the challenge situation, when they encounter the exam that attack their academic competence, that would create a threat, stereotype threat, that would make them nervous, make them increasing arousal, make them distracted from the task. But this effect does not occur for white students. For white students, whether you have to write your name or a race or just your name, but no race, doesn't matter. They perform at the same level in the two conditions. This is a demonstration of stereotype threat. Stereotype threat not only work for Black people or minorities, it also works for whites. And the researchers ask white participants to do a mini golf game. They do a mini golf game, and you created two conditions. One condition is no, not threatening condition, no threat. You tell them that this game tests your sports intelligence. No stress, no threat for that. And then for the experimental group, you tell them that this game tests your natural athletic ability. In the United States, there's a stereotype for whites that you have lower natural athletic ability. There was a play a few years ago, and there was also a TV drama with a title that a white man can't jump. White man can't jump. So that's a stereotype for white people. Compared with Black people, lower natural athletic ability. And then the dependent variable be the performance on the golf game. White subjects in the threatened condition, they had a lower performance on the golf game. That shows a stereotype threat. Self-fulfilling prophecy is another important consequence of stereotyping. There was one classical study to demonstrate this effect. Researchers asked white students to interview white and Black students as job applicants. So the subjects are white students, and then there are two conditions, two experimental conditions. One condition is the applicant is a white person. Another condition is that the applicant is Black person. And then the dependent variable. For one dependent variable is that how far away the white subject sit away from the black person. And the white subject sits farther away and made less eye contact with blacks. This behavior is distant, and that will influence how the black people will react. And also, of course, the white participant or the black participant will be influenced by the interviewer's style. And the black participant will be less responsive, will answer questions in a less competent way than the white participants. The white interviewers were really using different interviewing styles. When they were interviewing white participants, they used the white style. When they were interviewing the black participants, they were using the black style. And this kind of interview styles would influence the participants. The participants be responding in corresponding way. This is a self-fulfilling prophecy. One interesting feature is that when the white interviewers were interviewing black participants or black applicants, they ask fewer questions. They ask shorter questions. And they ask simpler questions. Of course, that will influence how the black applicant would respond, would answer the questions. The white interviewers were expecting lower competence from the black applicants, and their style, their interview style, their questions they're asking show this, and that will influence the black applicant's response. This would create a self-fulfilling prophecy. How do we measure stereotypes and prejudice? The most easiest way to measure stereotypes and prejudice is self-report. And self-report measures, so you just ask people to report their generalizations or their generalized beliefs about certain groups, minority groups, women, the elderly, etc. But people don't always tell you the truth. It's not always accurate and valid to use this methodology. Recently, there are some covert or implicit measures of stereotype. For example, the IAT, the implicit association test, is one example of covert measures of IAT, stereotypes and prejudice. Let's try that. So I'm at the website where you can do an IAT on race. First, there are some self-report measures. They ask some questions about your beliefs about Black people. So here, this is one. Yeah. White people to different self-supporting. Yeah. Say neutral on all of them. White people are intelligent. Black people on scale, hard working. Yeah. These are self-report. White people are intelligent. to violence, patriotic. Now here's the IAT, implicit association task. So you're going to use the E key. E is on the left, I is on the right, and you're supposed to categorize items into groups as fast as you can. These are the 4 groups, and the item belong to each. Good or bad? Good. These are words: fabulous, laughing, celebrate, cheer. Positive words, the negative words: angry, detest, horrific, etc. And then black people, white people, and then continue. Black people, white people. Okay, black on the left, white on the right. And then let's do that. Spacebar. So spacebar. Black people, white people. Okay, now bad. Now bad is on the left, the same key as black people. Black people was on the left, and bad on the left also. So here, oh no, here. Oh no. Good. Now here, bad or black people, that's an association. So if I have a strong prejudice or stereotypes about black people, I would be fast. I'll be fast on these trials. Oh, okay. Same key. Again, the same association. So white or good. White people, white people. Now white people on the left, black people on the right. Okay. Okay. So now bad is associated with white, black associated with good. If I have negative stereotypes about Black people, I will be slow on these trials. Let's see here, bad white, bad white on the left, good Black on the right. Oh, in here. Okay. That's confusing. This is too confusing. Okay. Oh no, I gave up. So you get an idea. So I'm supposed to be as fast as possible. And if I'm really fast on these trials, it means I would have an implicit association between good qualities and Black people. On the other hand, if I have a negative stereotype about Black people, I would be slow on these trials. That's an implicit association test. It's one way to test the stereotypes in an implicit way or covert way. Another covert testing of a stereotype is the so-called bogus pipeline test. This is a test where you tell the subject that you have a lie detector attached on them. So you want them to tell the truth about their beliefs and feelings towards certain groups. And you will be able to tell whether they're telling you the truth or not. Research shows that stereotyping is very fast. It happens very fast and it happens automatically. It is very difficult to control. It is difficult to stop. Stereotype activation is automatic. And every time you see somebody, as soon as you categorize that person into a group, stereotype activates. When people are trying to suppress stereotypes, it becomes even stronger. This applies to all thoughts, all kinds of ideas, concepts. The more you try to avoid it, the more you try to not think about it, the more powerful it comes up. And this is called the rebound effect. Also, in everyday life, sometimes we actively maintain stereotypes. Stereotypes are useful. They contain some useful information for us to understand other people and understand our own situation. The societies show persistence of subtle forms of discrimination. Some of the discrimination in society are pretty obvious, but some are really subtle. This will be especially prominent in situations where blatant or obvious discrimination is outlawed. The book has some detailed information about how stereotypes get activated automatically and how hard it is to suppress the rebound effect and the confirmation of stereotypes. There are some ways you can reduce prejudice, stereotyping, the cognition, the generalization about certain groups. That's hard to prevent. But prejudice can be reduced. One reason that there are hostility, prejudice, and negative feelings between different groups is the distinction between different groups. Is a division between us and them. It is a division between the in-group and out-group that keeps the hostility going. Sharif did a classical study about competition between different groups, and the book has a good explanation of this study. Sharif did a study with 8-year-old boys. He divided the Boy Scouts attending to camping activities into 2 groups. And when the 2 groups of boys first get into contact with each other, they engaged in competitive activities. They competed with each other, and they became hostile to each other. And they were calling each other names. They were raiding each other's camps. They didn't like each other. And then Sharif tried to get them back together, tried to reduce their in-group favoritism, and try to develop intergroup friendships. One effective way to get the 2 groups to like each other better is to give them some common tasks, give them some common activities, create common goals. And he brought the 2 groups of boys together to work on a common project, like repair the campground, clean up the environment, and pool money together to rent a video for the weekend. Do something together, accomplish a common goal. A superordinate goal will create a superordinate group. When the 2 groups were independent, they had unique identities. One group called themselves the Rattlers. The second group called themselves the Eagles. Now, after they come back together to work on a common activity, having a superordinate goal, they begin to develop a bigger group. The bigger group is more inclusive. So the interdependence and cooperation in the common activities, the superordinate goals lead to a common identity. And then the common identity will lead to favorable attitudes. Divisions create hostility. Merging creates favorable attitudes. In real life, this is a really interesting example from Muhammad Ali. He was a well-known boxer, a prize fighter, world champion, professional prize fighter, boxer. And during the Vietnam War, he was drafted, but he refused to go to war on behalf of the United States. And the United States government was going to arrest him, and he made a statement about his attitude toward the racial relations between the 2 groups. He said to the press, "I aren't draft dodging, I aren't burning no flags, I aren't running to Canada, I'm staying right here. You want to send me to jail? Fine, you go right ahead. I've been in jail for 400 years. I could be there for 4 or 5 more, but I aren't going no 10,000 miles to help murder and kill other poor people." So he has a strong sense of group identity. He was speaking in an African American like a language style with unique grammatical characteristics. and he was also strongly identified with African American history, the 400 years of slavery, the operation. If I want to die, I will die right here, right now, fighting you. If I want to die, you my enemy, not no Chinese, no white Kong, no Japanese. So the mainstream, he was identifying the mainstream society, his oppressors as his opponents, the outgroups. And this kind of intergroup division creates a hostility. And in order to overcome this kind of hostile attitude, creating a superordinate goal would be helpful. So if the American government can create a superordinate goal, oh, we need to beat the white cause, we need to fight the Vietnamese, etc. That would reduce this kind of hostility. But at that time, it was impossible. Social psychologists have done some really interesting studies about how to reduce prejudice. This is really a clever study. It's not a pure controlled experiment. It's a field study. And researchers sent a Black student to interview students. Well, let me see here. When we were then you have a Black interviewer and white interviewer. So one independent variable is race, identity, or ethnicity of the interviewer. And the subjects were Black students, and the subjects were all African American students. They were attending a ball game, a university ball game. And another variable is university affiliation. In some conditions, the interviewer and the Black student being interviewed were from the same university, or at least they support the same team. They were wearing the hat of the same hat. In some other condition, or this is a different hat. In some other conditions, they were wearing a different hat from different universities. So there are two identities involved. One identity is ethnicity. The Black students were in group with the Black interviewer, but out group with white interviewer. And the other identity is university affiliation. Same university versus a different university. And the same university produces more help. The dependent variable is the percentage of the Black students who completed the survey, who helped the interviewer. And here is same university. The Black interviewer received a lot of help. The Black students being interviewed treated them as in-group. The white interviewer received less help, although they came from the same university. But look here, the interviewer and interviewees are from different universities. The white interviewer received even less help. So when the white was stated in another way, when the white interviewer were from the same university as the black interviewees, although they have a different ethnicity, they belong to the same university, or they belong to the same group of sports fans, and the white interviewer received more help from the black students. For the black students, the same effect is observed. When the black interviewer is from the same university, they receive more help than the black interviewer coming from a different university, from the black respondents. Creating common identity is useful for reducing prejudice. There's also this really interesting study by Gardner and Doledio. So they had students come into the lab, and the students were divided into two groups. So two groups. At the initial, they had two groups. Each group had 3 people, and later on, the groups were combined. Now they have 2 conditions. In one condition, the 6 people are supposed to have collaboration. They work as a 6-member group. And then the other condition, the 6 people were supposed to work independently. And then after this treatment, either work collaboratively as a group or work independently, each of the participants reported their attitude to the other group. The condition that where the 6 people who have worked collaboratively had better views, more positive views of the other group. Having a common identity, superordinate identity, really reduces prejudice. Another way to reduce prejudice is extended contact hypothesis. Extended contact means that the 2 competing groups don't necessarily have full contact one-on-one. If some members of the groups have a contact or develop a friendship, they will be the seeds of change. They influence the other group members. Their study had 3 phases or 3 steps. At the beginning, they had 2 groups, and the groups rated each other, their attitude. And then the 2 groups came to, the 2 groups have a separate group development, team building activities. After that, they rated their attitude. They showed a stronger in-group favoritism. And now the researchers try to reduce in-group favoritism, try to reduce prejudice. How would you do that? So the 2 groups were large groups. From each group, they selected 1 representative. So they selected 1 from each group, and then they make these two persons come together and work together in cooperation. And after that, they send the two members back to their own groups. And they send back to their own groups to talk to their group members, the rest of the group members, about how they work together. So the other group members, they have never had contact with the other group, but they also changed their attitude. After the manipulation, after the two representatives from each group developed a friendship and reported their friendship back to their initial groups, the whole group changed a little bit on their in-group favoritism. In-group favoritism gets reduced. That is an expanded contact hypothesis.